My name is Tomas, and I have been a truck driver for over 20 years. I have always enjoyed the road, that feeling of freedom that comes with being constantly on the move. I live in Querétaro with my wife Carla and our son Santiago. My routine is quite simple. Load the truck, check that everything is in order, and head to my destination. I usually make long trips lasting several days, so I tend to bring a bit of clothing, some food, and of course, my old radio, which accompanies me on every journey. That Monday started like any other. I got up early, had breakfast with my family, and headed to the loading terminal. Carla saw me off as usual, with a kiss on the cheek and a smile that tried to hide her worry. Santiago, who is only 7 years old, hugged my leg and asked me to bring him a toy from wherever my trip ended. I promised him I would, as always. I climbed into the truck and started the engine. The purr of the motor was familiar and comforting. I checked the GPS to ensure the route and began driving. I had to deliver a load of medical supplies to a hospital in Monterrey. It was a 2-day trip, so I planned to spend the night in a roadside motel. The first part of the trip went smoothly. I passed through several small towns and villages, observing life as it continued its normal course. I stopped at a service station to fill up the tank and stretch my legs. When I returned to the truck, I noticed a man who seemed to be looking for a ride. I usually don't pick up hitchhikers, but something about him made me feel I should. "Do you need a lift?" I asked. "Yes, sir. Thank you very much," he replied with a friendly smile. "My name is Pedro and I'm heading to Monterrey." I gestured for him to get in. Pedro was a middle-aged man with a calm but somewhat tired look. We started driving and chatting. Pedro told me he was a mechanic looking for work in Monterrey. The conversation was pleasant, and soon the road felt less lonely. It was already night when I noticed Pedro was uneasy. He kept looking out the window as if searching for something in the darkness. I tried not to give it much importance, but his behavior began to make me nervous. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "Yes, it's just that this road brings back bad memories," he replied without elaborating. We continued in silence for a while. Then something strange happened. The truck's engine started to sputter and the lights flickered. I had never had any issues with my truck, so this caught me by surprise. I decided to pull over to the side of the road to check the engine. "Let me help you," Pedro said, getting out of the truck. We opened the hood and started checking. We didn't find anything wrong, but when I tried to start it again, the engine refused to turn over. We were in the middle of nowhere, with only the darkness and silence of the night around us. "I think we'll have to wait for another vehicle to pass by," Pedro suggested. I nodded, though I didn't like the idea of staying there for long. The road was deserted, and the atmosphere was starting to feel eerie. I took out my phone to call for a tow truck, but there was no signal. For the first time in years, I felt a chill run down my spine. Pedro and I sat in the truck, waiting. It wasn't long before we both started hearing a strange sound. It was like a whisper, but I couldn't tell where it was coming from. Pedro looked at me with wide eyes. "Did you hear that?" he asked. "Yes, but I don't see anyone," I replied, trying to stay calm. Then, out of nowhere, we saw a dark figure moving among the trees at the side of the road. Pedro turned pale and started muttering something I couldn't understand. "What's wrong? What is that?" I asked, but he just shook his head. The figure moved closer, and I could see it had the shape of a woman, though her face was covered by some kind of veil. I felt my heart pounding and knew this was not something natural. Pedro started speaking quickly, telling me a story that sounded like a nightmare. He said he had worked on a nearby road many years ago, and one night, while driving home, he had accidentally run over a woman. Since then, every time he took that route, he saw her figure and heard her whispers. "I should never have come back here," he said, trembling. "She follows me. She doesn't let me be." The fear in his voice was palpable, and although I wanted to believe there was a logical explanation, the figure was still there, watching us. I decided we couldn't stay any longer. "We have to get out of here," I said, trying to sound decisive. "Push the truck with me. Let's move it even a few meters." With great effort, we managed to move the truck, and, as if by a miracle, the engine started again. We quickly got in, and I accelerated, leaving the figure behind in the darkness. Pedro remained silent for the rest of the trip, and I didn't have much to say either. Something strange and terrifying had happened, and we both knew it. Finally, we arrived in Monterey at dawn. Pedro thanked me and quickly left. I delivered the load to the hospital and headed to a motel to rest a bit before starting the journey back. Despite my exhaustion, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. When I got home, Carla and Santiago welcomed me with hugs and smiles. I tried to forget what had happened, but the image of the figure on the road kept appearing in my dreams. Days passed, and I returned to my usual routines, but I couldn't get the experience out of my head. One day, while having coffee with other truckers, one of them mentioned something about the Woman's Road, a local legend about a woman who had died tragically and whose spirit still haunted the area. I felt a chill as I heard the story. I couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, I had encountered that woman on my trip. I decided not to tell anyone else about what had happened. Some stories are better left on the road where they belong. My name is Daniel Torres, and I've been driving trucks across the United States and Canada for over 20 years. My life on the road has been a mix of routine, long hours of solitude, and occasional interesting encounters with other drivers at rest stops. I have never considered myself superstitious, and although I have heard many strange stories from other truckers, I've always taken them with a grain of salt. It was a summer night when I received an assignment to haul a load from Texas to Ontario, Canada. The trip would be long and lonely, but I was already used to such journeys. The truck was loaded with agricultural machinery, and the company wanted it delivered within a week. I left Houston with a full tank and the thermometer showing 95 degrees Fahrenheit. The first part of the trip went smoothly. Traffic was light, and the roads, though long and monotonous, were in good condition. I passed through Dallas and then Oklahoma City without any issues. I stopped to rest at a service area near Wichita, Kansas, and allowed myself a quick break before continuing. 3 days had passed since I left Houston. I was driving on the desolate highway that runs through North Dakota, a region where civilization seems to have forgotten its existence. Night fell quickly, wrapping the landscape in a deep, almost tangible darkness. There was barely any traffic, and the only sound breaking the silence was the constant purr of the truck's engine. It was then that I noticed something unusual in the sky. At first I thought they were stars, but soon I realized they were too large and bright to be stars. There were 3 lights forming a triangle, moving in sync. My first reaction was to think it was some sort of military aircraft, but something about their movements made me doubt. The lights were slowly approaching, as if they were observing my truck. I decided to stop at the next rest area to get a better look at them. I found a small deserted stop and turned off the engine. I got out of the truck and looked up at the sky. The lights were still there, hanging in the air, making no noise. Suddenly, one of the lights descended quickly and disappeared behind a nearby hill. The other 2 lights remained stationary, as if they were waiting. I returned to the truck, trying to rationalize what I had just seen. Maybe it was just a helicopter or a drone, I kept telling myself. But deep down, I knew something was off. I started the engine and continued on my way, hoping to leave that disturbing experience behind. I had not driven more than 15 minutes when I felt a strong jolt at the back of the truck. The vehicle shook violently, and I had to struggle to maintain control. I thought I had hit an animal or a pothole, so I slowed down and pulled over to check. With a flashlight in hand, I walked around the truck and examined the rear. There were no signs of any visible impact. Everything seemed to be in order. But as I was about to get back into the cab, I heard a noise behind me. I turned quickly and saw a dark figure standing, watching me from a distance. My eyes struggled to adjust to the darkness, but the figure did not move or make any noise. I stood there, paralyzed for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest. Then, the figure vanished into the darkness as silently as it had appeared. Without wasting any more time, I ran back to the truck and locked the doors. I sped away from that place as fast as I could, without looking back. With my pulse still racing, I continued my journey through the dark roads of North Dakota. I tried to focus on driving, but I couldn't get the image of that dark figure out of my head. What had it been? A vagrant? An animal? None of those explanations seemed convincing. The road was completely deserted, and the monotony of the landscape only increased my anxiety. I decided to turn on the radio to distract myself. I tuned to random stations, but only found static and strange music I had never heard before. Finally, I found a station broadcasting local news and tried to concentrate on that. Then, it happened again. I saw in the rearview mirror how the lights in the sky reappeared, this time closer. My heart raced, and I felt a cold sweat run down my back. The lights seemed to be following me, maintaining a constant distance. I tried to accelerate, but no matter how fast I went, the lights were always there, floating in the distance. I decided I needed help. I desperately looked for a sign of life, some indication that I was not alone on that endless road. Finally, I saw a sign for a truck stop 5 miles ahead. I sped toward it, hoping to find someone who could offer me an explanation. I arrived at the truck stop and parked next to 2 other trucks. I got out of the vehicle and headed to the diner, which was still open. Inside, I found a couple of truckers having coffee and chatting. I approached them and told them what I had seen. To my surprise, they did not laugh or treat me like I was crazy. Instead, one of them, an older man with a gray beard, nodded slowly. "You saw the lights, didn't you?" he said quietly. "You're not the first, and you won't be the last." He explained that those lights had been seen by several truckers over the years. Some said they were UFOs, others believed they were secret military experiments. No one knew for sure what they were, but everyone agreed it was best not to draw too much attention. After listening to their stories, I decided it was best to follow their advice. I finished my coffee, thanked the truckers for their words, and returned to the truck. I was determined to complete my delivery and get out of that state as quickly as possible. The following days passed without incident. The lights did not reappear, and the figure in the darkness seemed like a distant memory. Finally, I reached Ontario and made the delivery. I felt an enormous sense of relief leaving that trip behind. Now, every time I drive on a lonely road at night, I can't help but look up at the sky, expecting to see those lights again. Although I have never had a similar experience since, the memory of those days in North Dakota stays with me always. I don't know what those lights were or who the figure I saw in the darkness was, but I know there are things in this world we cannot explain, and sometimes it's best not to seek answers. I just hope I never encounter the unknown on my journeys again.